Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today on this momentous occasion when we get to celebrate the rescue plan of $1.9 trillion that we received, that we passed last week, and that was passed through the Senate and that was signed by President Biden. And we expect that by the end of this week, people across the country and certainly across the state and the Rio Grande Valley will start receiving these checks into their bank accounts, at their mailbox. This $1.9 trillion brings over $1 billion to Congressional District 15. That's over $1 billion with a B. $584 million will be going to counties and cities around our district. And to give you an example of that $584 million is going to cities and to counties. For example, Hidalgo County alone, just the county, will be receiving over $212 million. And I have a few highlighted. The city of McAllen will be receiving over $42 million. The city of Pharr will be receiving over $28 million. The city of Edinburgh over $25 million. And every single city in my congressional district will be getting millions of dollars that could be used for so many projects. But we're especially excited that some of the most struggling people in our community that are going through tough times will be getting a stimulus check of $1,400. That's the vast majority. Over 95% of people in South Texas will qualify for those funds. Our small businesses that have been really struggling, and we all know the mom and pop shops, the restaurants, there's a special provision for restaurants to get funding. They took some of the biggest hits during this pandemic. We have special funding for them. Another round of PPP, which means that we can keep our doors open and we can keep people employed and the lights on. And I have certainty that this is the last shot in the arm that we're going to need before we're completely open. There's another round of funding for people who have fallen behind on their rent to give them rental assistance so they can make their monthly payment. There's also a mortgage assistance. If people are losing their home, they can apply for this mortgage assistance to assure that they can make their mortgage payment. And I find this really satisfying in that we're not bailing out banks, we're bailing out homeowners. We're making sure people do not lose their home, that they can stay in their home. We have health care funding. We have $130 billion that's allocated to getting our schools back open. We all want to get our kids back to school. We just want to do it safely. Billions of dollars have been allocated nationwide. So the monies that I talked about, that doesn't include our school districts. All of our school districts, every single school district will be getting millions of dollars to be able to open up, to be able to gear up. Really, there's no excuse in terms of a lack of funding to assure that people are getting what they deserve and what they need in these very difficult times. And you can go to irs.gov and monitor when you should be getting your $1,400 stimulus check. This is on top of the $600 that were received already. As you know, we've reached our 100 million mark of vaccinations. Over 100 million Americans have received at least one vaccination. So we're blowing and going in terms of getting vaccines out into people's arms. I was in the small town of Falfurrias this past weekend with 1,000 vaccines in a small community of 7,000, and they had already had 1,000 before. So in many areas within my congressional district, we're at the state or above the state and above the federal national average in terms of vaccinations. Here in Hidalgo County, last week we celebrated 100,000 vaccines into people's arms here within the county, and I can tell you that nothing can make me more proud than this. I'm very optimistic that we're coming out of this, and I say we may not be out of the woods, but we certainly have turned the corner, and brighter days are ahead, and we've gone through a very, very tough last year, and even at the beginning of this year has been complicated. But I think it's a time that we need to continue social distancing. We need to continue wearing our masks and following CDC recommendations. But I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think by July, I know that President Biden has said that he thinks by May most Americans will be inoculated and will have gotten shots in the arms of most people. I'm going to be a little bit more cautious and say that by July, in my opinion, I think things will be wide open. I think you're going to see our economy wide open. I've signed on to a letter in the Committee of Foreign Affairs that after we have our vaccinations, and Americans are vaccinated and inoculated, that we look across our border to our friends and neighbors on both sides, Mexico and Canada, and start helping them get vaccinated, because ultimately we don't live alone. We're not an isolated country. We don't live in a bubble, and we need to assure that our friends and family across the border can come back, and we can open our bridges and open our local economy. We've taken a lot of hits here locally. A lot of our small mom and pop stores are shuttered. Our malls are empty. Our hotels and restaurants are not at full capacity the way they've been. I think you're going to see that changing pretty drastically once we get the bridges open. We are in communication with the Mexican government in terms of to try to figure out how we can be helpful once we finish, and I want to make very clear, once we finish getting it done here at home, once we've immunized our population, once everybody has had their immunization shot, and we're at herd immunity, which means we need to get 75 to 85% of people vaccinated. And people ask me, which is the best vaccine? And my answer to that is the first vaccine you can get is the best vaccine. They're all very, very good vaccines, and they all have a very high level of efficacy, and they've been tested by thousands of people. And the first vaccine that you can get, you should not miss that opportunity. You should get it. And I think that it's not only is it good for you, I think it's our national duty, our responsibility to our country and to our friends and neighbors here to immunize ourselves and to assure that we can't be contagious to others and that we are protected. And this is helpful to our healthcare community here in South Texas. As you know, our hospitals were busting at the seams at one time. We were losing 30 to 50 people a day. We're still losing people every single day. We're still losing people, so we're not out of the woods, but it's much less. Our hospitalizations rates are down, infection rates are down, and death rates are also down, but they're not at zero. So we need to continue down this path, and we need to continue encouraging people across the country, but certainly here in our community, to take that time and go out and get your vaccination. If people are having trouble, especially seniors or citizens that might be having trouble getting registered or getting that shot in their arm, please, please, please call my office. We can help you get registered. We can help you find a location nearest to you, or we might even be able to find a way to get it to your home. We had a lot of, in my rural communities, we had a lot of people that were immobile, that couldn't move around, and we had a van with a nurse in it, and we drove home by home by home to older people who were that were immobile, were not able to get out to a clinic to get the shot, and we were able to administer it there at their home. So we're every week and every month there are more and more locations, more availability of vaccines, and they're easier and easier to get. So I recommend that everyone does that. En español, les quiero dar las gracias por estar aquí. Estamos aquí celebrando lo que pasamos, la propuesta fiscal la semana pasada de 1.9 trillones de dólares para el país. Y en el distrito mío, en el distrito 15, podemos traer $1 billón, 584 millones de dólares para los condados y para todas las ciudades en el distrito. Hay cheques que le va a llegar a 95% de la gente que califica, de $1,400. Hay otra ronda de cheques para las pequeñas empresas, los negocios que han batallado mantener las puertas abiertas. Hay asistencia para gente que no puede pagar su renta por desempleo. También hay fondos para desempleo extra. Hay gente que está perdiendo su casa, que no puede hacer su pago al banco. También hay un fondo especial para asegurar que puedan completar esos pagos y que no pierdan su casa. Así es que es una ayuda holística, es muy amplia. Hay muchos fondos para poder abrir las escuelas. Tenemos 130 mil millones de dólares para poder abrir las escuelas. Creo que todos queremos abrir las escuelas, pero lo queremos hacer de una manera segura y de una manera que podamos garantizar la seguridad de los niños que van a la escuela y las maestras que están dando las clases, y asegurar que para este verano podamos tener nuestra economía abierta. Y lo que yo he estado empujando en el Congreso, que después de que vacunemos a todos los americanos y a toda nuestra comunidad, necesitamos que voltear a ver a nuestros vecinos en México y en Canadá y en otros países para ayudarlos que también puedan conseguir la vacuna para que ellos también estén saludables, para poder tener una apertura completa, que poder volver a abrir nuestros malls, los hoteles, los restaurantes, los pequeños negocios que han estado batallando mucho en esta pandemia. Poder abrir los puentes obviamente es muy importante y no lo podemos hacer hasta que lleguemos a ese punto de seguridad, vacunando a las poblaciones de los dos lados. Y es algo que no vivimos aislados, no vivimos en una burbuja, somos una comunidad con una frontera en medio y necesitamos que asegurar que cuando nosotros terminemos vacunando nuestra comunidad y nuestro estado, nuestro país, que también lo hagamos para nuestros vecinos. Y con eso, with that, I'll open it up to questions.
One of the bigger questions, right, is when will these respective cities and counties be able to finally receive the funds that investment
Yeah.
for?
Great question. Last time it took us about 2 weeks to get that funding. So Judge Cortez called me like almost immediately the last round on the CARES Act, and we were able to get on the phone and have it wired into their bank account within days. So I am hopeful and that all of this probably within the next 2 weeks, our municipalities and our counties will have the funding in their bank accounts and can begin working and starting on projects. There are a lot. The rules are a little more lax in the CARES Act, so there's going to be a lot more leeway for projects that otherwise wouldn't have qualified under the old bill. Yes, sir.
Two questions, Vicente. Firstly, as you know, it was not a bipartisan issue. It was straight down party lines. What do you say to those that feel that you've spent too much money and it's going to overheat the economy?
Well, clearly, 95% of this money is going direct to the pockets of the American people. The last tax cut that we had in the last administration went to the 1% of Americans. That $1 trillion tax cut went to the 1% of Americans. 95% of this funding is going to average Americans like you and I. And I always like to use a comparison of the Iraq War. We spent $9.3 trillion in the Iraq War, and the average American got zero. What did we get for it? Nothing, but we're still in conflicts around the world. Some of our beloved veterans have come back wounded. We've lost many lives, and we never really gained anything off that massive investment, and we did it again in Afghanistan. So I think it's time to start taking care of the American people and doing what's right by people who are struggling in the middle of this pandemic, average folks. I hope that we get back and we're able to do something for student loans and student loan forgiveness. I think we need to do something for the young people that are struggling. I think we've given billions and now trillions of dollars around the country, and we've forgotten young Americans who have done the best to do their best and try to get their education to do better for themselves and for our country, and I think they deserve a break. We carry more student loan debt than any country in the United States, and I find that unacceptable and something that should be addressed.
My second question is, Congressman Gonzalez had a similar event to you today, but his was virtual, like a webinar talking about this plan, the American Rescue Plan. And my question to him was, is there anywhere in that bill where there could be money directed to the Rio Grande Valley so we can resurrect our PBS and NPR stations, given that we're the biggest market without that?
Yeah, so
the Cuellar said, as he's a member of appropriations, he's going to get the relevant department or agency in and quiz them as to why we are going without.
Right. So it's not direct, but funding can be used. Funding that the county, $212 million is just one county in my district that's getting. Every municipality and every school district is also getting a lot of funding. So when I see projects like PBS or Quinta Mazatlan or other great projects that we have in our community that we love, I tell people, we all have this huge pool of money that we've never had before, right? We have to begin with that premise that we've never had this much money at one time ever before. And let's not be greedy, let's be smart, let's be thoughtful, let's work together. PBS is something that the entire community benefits from, and sometimes you have counties or municipalities that have funding that they're not able to expend according to the rules or within the time limits, and I think they should look at projects like PBS, Quinta Mazatlan, and many others within our community to bring resources to. But I do think that we should be challenging the exact authorities that are in charge of getting monies out to places like public broadcasting and other educational channels that are important for South Texas. So we'll keep pushing.
Are there going to be any concrete rules or regulations to, of course, again, right, the counties or respective cities that are going to be receiving this funding?
regulations on how they have to spend the money? Yes. They're much more lax. It's not going to be like the CARES Act that had very, very strict rules and a very strict timeline, so strict actually that people still had a lot of money. I mean, the state had billions of dollars December of last year when that timeline ended, and our counties and cities did too. So this will be a little more lax in terms of there'll be a lot more opportunity for other projects that are important to our communities that don't necessarily fit in exactly in that very rigid regulation that was laid out on the CARES Act. So we're happy about that.
And also, does FEMA have a hand at helping with some of this, the funding that's been distributed this week?
Well, the distribution is handled by the Treasury Department, and FEMA's down here. FEMA's doing their part, and they'll have some funding that they'll be distributing on issues that are FEMA related. As you know, they're now here helping on the border with the surge that we've been dealing with this last month or so. So that's how to the extent that FEMA will be involved. ¿Alguna otra pregunta? Yes, sir.
Governor Abbott says Texas is 100% open for business. Now he has relaxed the statewide coronavirus mandates. You and I know that is not the case, is not true along our border. Our economies are still being blighted by the political decisions to stop Mexican visa holders from crossing our land ports to shop, stay at hotels, eat in our restaurants, and visit their families. The suspension of so-called non-essential travel has now been in place for a year. That has been more than enough time for the federal government, working with local cities, to put in place health checkpoints to test that visitors have high temperatures. Because this could easily be done, one can only deduce that this is political, and the government does not want our border communities to thrive. Can you please bring us some good news about this?
That's not true. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and people are dying every single day here in our community, and the numbers have just now slowed down, and across the border people are dying even at higher rates than they are here. So I don't believe that the borders are closed to stop our prosperity. I think they're closed to keep us alive and keep us healthy, and under CDC recommendations, that was the best idea. The governor decided to open the state a little too early. I think he should have waited a few more months and allowed for the state population to get inoculated. I think he jumped the gun, and we're going to hopefully not, but we may see some repercussions from that. And at the very minimum, if you're going to open the economy for the state, at the very, very minimum, you should require these. And he didn't do that. At the very minimum, under CDC recommendations, under Dr. Fauci, the World Health Organization, or any local physician that you talk to will tell you that the smartest thing in the world is to wear a mask. So when you make decisions based on your political agenda instead of people's health, you have different results. So I don't agree that our bridges are closed to prevent us from prospering. I can assure you that we are going to get them open once we're in a safe place health-wise, and the prosperity is going to be more robust than we've ever seen before. And I think I see us going into the roaring 20s. And I think that the next 10 years are going to be full of prosperity and health, and we're gonna bounce back more than anything we've ever seen in our lifetime. I really am optimistic of that. So I'm not going to believe that nonsense that they're closing, some conspiracy theory that they're closing our bridges to hold us down. That's not true.
Does the Biden administration understand that men and women in Brownsville, Ignosa and McAllen, Wayland, Laredo, one community with one economy?
Yeah, I think he does. I think everybody has a pretty clear understanding. People who know trade, people who know the border, they've all been down here. As you know, Leader Pelosi's been down here. This administration's been down. The Secretary Mayorkas was here a week ago. During past administrations, they've been down. So no, I think it's a pretty clear understanding that our communities rely on each other, that trade keeps us alive, that we have friends and family and business partners on both sides of the border.
Well, the those news conferences and the media that came out of that was basically talking about the unaccompanied children. They were talking about COVID. They were not necessarily talking about the growing economy on both sides being unified together. I didn't hear that being covered.
Yeah, well, I didn't quite understand that, but talking about on the unaccompanied children and the spike in migration, I've been one of the Democrats that's pushed very hard on this administration, and saying we need to have an orderly process to get people across the border and for them to seek asylum. I personally believe people should be allowed to ask for asylum in their home country or their neighboring country, or we could set up something similar like what we've done in Donna, these tent facilities in southern Mexico where people can come in and register and even have asylum hearings there and we can assure their safety as they make that claim. And if they are granted asylum with that document, they can get on an airplane with $300 or $400 and fly in, instead of having to make this very dangerous trek up through Mexico, having to pay cartels. Young girls are getting raped. People are being abused. They're being extorted. A lot of the funding that's going to the cartels is coming from American family members that they have here on this side of the border that are wiring this money to help get them down. And I think the fact is we have to come to terms with that more than 80% of asylum seekers never, ever qualify for asylum. But they are all absorbed into our economy because we clearly have a labor shortage in this country that needs to be addressed. And I think we need to address that through labor guest worker programs and other ideas like that. And we need to have a holistic approach to immigration. And the reason what's happening on the border is two reasons. We have 3 countries in crisis in Central America that we need to address, as we have many around the world, and try to stabilize them there. But also we have a broken immigration system, and we need a holistic approach. Asylum seekers should have an easier way to ask for asylum and fly into the country. This other 80% that gets absorbed into our economy should have a legal pathway to ask for we should have a robust guest worker program that's easy both for the laborer and the business owner here to process somebody and get them here to work. For dreamers, we have over 800,000 dreamers in this country who, as we know, came here by no fault of their own. They were children when they got here, and they're culturally American. They've been educated here. They work here. They've been productive citizens. And we need to find an immediate path for them to become citizens. And the millions of undocumented workers who have been here need to be addressed. If they've been here for 10 years or longer, and they've had employment, and they've been good, abiding citizens, and they haven't had any trouble, we need to find them a pathway to citizenship and get them out of the shadows of our country and our society. I was talking to one of the farmers here locally, and he had 500 acres not too far from here where they weren't able to get their harvest off the ground. So they lost their harvest because of lack of workers. So clearly, in order for us to continue to grow our economy, we need a labor base. And we're not having enough children in this country to continue growing our economy, and that's just a fact. So we need to look to our friends in these countries. Furthermore, I'm looking for other ideas of how we can help these 3 Central American countries that are in crisis: Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. And I think what we've learned in the middle of this pandemic is that we rely too much on China for essential goods, and our supply line was broken. PPE was being manufactured, and other critical, very simple products were being manufactured in China that ultimately impacted our national security and our national health. And I think we should incentivize many of these companies, many of them American, to move to this hemisphere, to move to Mexico, to move to these 3 countries, and give them tax incentives to do this work in these countries and hopefully be able to slow down migration and create conditions for people to want to stay home.
Congressman Cuellar, I thought he had a deal cut with Homeland Security September, October, November of last year. In each case, apparently, lightning struck as he feared from the White House, and that did not happen. Do you support Congressman Cuellar's efforts now to try to open the borders to non-essential travelers? What is he trying to do?
At the right time, under CDC recommendations, if we can make sure that we don't have another spike in COVID cases on our side of the border in our community, and that it's not going to cause more illness and death, I'm totally supportive of that. I think it's... Okay. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, kind of taking off of the immigration issue a little bit, right, and kind of going back right with FEMA, are you thankful for the efforts that FEMA is doing now, right, to kind of protect those, the migrant children that are coming over here?
Yeah, it's brand new, right? So we needed assistance. So we brought in FEMA, probably our National Guard and others will come in. It's something that we weren't manned for. There was a lot of processes were deteriorated in the last administration along the border, and I think we have a lot of work to do, and we don't have a lot of time to do it. So we need to move fast. But I think more than anything, if we need to have the right policy in place. Right now, we don't have the right policy in place. My heart breaks when I see these migrants coming across the border and these young children and women that are really suffering and they're looking for a better life. But we need to have an orderly process, and that's not a safe and orderly process. So that's clearly a concern and something that I will continue to address. Now, the Biden administration is not going to cage children. They're not going to divide families. They're not going to rip children from women's arms. But they do need to have a firm law and order-based system on the border that creates an orderly and safe process for people to get processed and ask for their asylum claim. And if they get it, they can come in. And if they don't, they can't. We need to figure out a different system for them to possibly apply for passage into the United States.
Would it be safe to say that you believe that the current situation with FEMA is like, I guess, a temporary solution to a very long problem that we've been having here at the border?
Well, I think it's an urgent situation, and we have a shortage. We can't have our Border Patrol and our custom agents babysitting children and feeding people and doing things that is not what they were trained to do. It's not what they were designed to do. So I think FEMA might be better equipped to handle an emergency kind of like what we're dealing with, not only here, but across our border. ¿Sí, en español?
De lo que comentó el gobernador Bravo en su visita, que está culpando al gobierno federal por esta situación de esta crisis migratoria que hay.
Sí, lo que pienso es que deberíamos de tener una manera más ordenada para que la gente que pida asilo lo pueda hacer de su país o de su país vecino o de algún centro migratorio en el sur de México donde se pueden registrar y pedir asilo. Y si les dan asilo con un documento, se pueden subir a un avión y llegar aquí con $300, porque el sistema que tenemos ahorita están pagando a carteles, muchas mujeres son raptadas, la gente son abusados y son extorsionados. Estos dineros que les cobran los carteles vienen de familiares que viven en Estados Unidos, y simplemente es un sistema que no funciona. Es un sistema peligroso para los niños, para las mujeres, y que está enriqueciendo a los carteles. Así es que definitivamente el sistema está roto y necesitamos que buscar soluciones.
¿Ya lo propusiste como congresista?
Sí, definitivamente estoy en comunicación con la administración de tener un mejor plan. Algo que no vaya a incentivar a la gente que quiera hacer este viaje. We need to have a policy in place that doesn't incentivize people to want to make this very dangerous trek. And they have other options to do the same thing without going through 3 or 4 countries and through Mexico, through several cartels and being extorted along the way. I think we need to have just more common sense solutions.
¿Hay control, congresista, de la gente que cruza en cuanto a la salud, de que no traigan el virus? ¿Se está haciendo las pruebas suficientes? ¿Cómo se está
Mira,
haciendo?
yo sé que la Caridad Católica ha hecho muy buen trabajo con los que estaban en Matamoros de MPP, pero mucha gente llega de una manera tan irregular que pienso que es imposible poderle hacer el examen a 100% de los migrantes. Y mira, ahorita tenemos nuestros puentes cerrados. Mexicanos con visas no pueden cruzar el puente. ¿Cómo puede ser posible que digamos que no hay problema que crucen por el río, los vamos a procesar y los vamos a soltar así, en medio de una pandemia? Si no estuviéramos en una pandemia, la situación sería diferente y la pudiéramos considerar diferente. Pero estamos en una pandemia. La situación ha mejorado, pero seguimos perdiendo gente todos los días. La gente muere en mi distrito todos los días por COVID-19. Así es que mientras que estamos en esta pandemia, necesitamos que tener otro criterio en cómo manejamos nuestra frontera.
¿Y las personas con visa van a volver regresar para atrás como antes?
¿Mande?
¿Las personas con visa van a poder regresar como antes?
La gente con visa va a poder cruzar. Ahorita pueden cruzar si llegan en avión, pero no van a poder cruzar los puentes hasta que abramos los puentes. Yo espero que de aquí al verano podamos abrir los puentes, ya inmunizando a nuestra comunidad y como les estoy diciendo, aparte de inmunizar a nuestra comunidad y a nuestro país, que es primero, ¿verdad? Lo primero que hacemos es vacunar a nuestra gente y luego necesitamos que voltear a nuestros vecinos en México, en Canadá y en otros países y ayudarlos que también tengan las mismas vacunas para que también estén inmunizados y saludables, para poder abrir bien las fronteras y regresar a una economía robusta. Okay? Well, if there's nothing else, I'll be around, okay? Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys. This is good news. It's the beginning of the beginning, right? Thanks a lot. Yep. Gracias.
Gracias.
Oh, I'm sorry.
President Biden said we're doing that vaccine for every American by the end of the day. So it just means it's good to vaccine